Welcome in, everyone. My name is Tom McHugh. I am one of the assistant directors of admission at College of the Holy Cross, and you are here for part 3 of 5 of our 5-part webinar series, How to Make Your Application Stand Out. I'm joined by my colleague, Drew Carter, who will be speaking with us shortly. And the question that we wanted to talk about tonight is one that we get pretty often. How will college admission offices know my high school? This is often questions that we get from students just about, are they compared to students within their high school and high schools down the road and high schools across the country? So, how do we know your high school? And before we jump into the topics at hand, do just want to say that closed captioning is available and that these webinars are all going to be archived on the Holy Cross admission website. So if you do want to watch back at any point or send along to family and friends, you'll be able to find this on our website in the next 24 hours. And we are just going to be launching some polls. So I will do the big reveal. Some of these are a little bit funny to start, and there'll be another one as we go along, but I'll reveal the results as time goes by. So first way that us as college admission counselors get to know about your high school is through the travel that we're doing both in person and virtually in the fall and in the spring. So we all 13 counselors at Holy Cross have different travel territories that we're responsible for. And we don't see each other for much of September and October and some of April as we're connecting with you at your individual high schools in the cities that you're from, and getting to sit down with your counselors as well. So, these are relationships that we've established over the years, that we really get to know the counselors in your office and your high school well. We know them physically from walking through the hallways and sitting in your classrooms and presenting in your counseling offices. And we also develop those relationships so that as questions come up, we are able to pick up the phone and speak to your high school counselors on about your application, about your candidacy, and through your college fairs as well, sitting and standing in your gymnasiums on fall and spring evenings. And we intimately get to know the high schools that you attend through our fall travel, both physically and virtually.
Tom, would you say when you travel to high schools, you have conversations with guidance counselors and when you come back off the road, you get a sense of what a school is like and the culture and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are some times where, depending on the day, we might not even have the opportunity to meet individually with students. We're just sitting down having a conversation with a counselor, and we talk about all sorts of things, the colleges that we're representing, and the high schools themselves. So I feel like through that travel, through that physical visit and those conversations with counselors that happen year in and year out, we do get a great sense of the culture and what the high school is all about.
One other way that we really get to know high schools is the history. In admissions offices across the country, we have records of past applicants, and certainly that's not so much about each individual applicant. It's more information about the courses that are available and about curriculum and grading and requirements. And we all have that information at hand when we're reading applications and when we're discussing them as a committee. And each year that goes by, we build a sort of a institutional knowledge. And every year that goes by, we add to that knowledge through data, through the knowledge that we have as an admissions committee when reading applications. So even schools that we haven't visited, we get a great sense of what to look for as far as curriculum and requirements, and all that stuff builds up each year. And even as admissions counselors might turn over from year to year, that institutional knowledge remains within the admission office. And so that when we start fresh for a new year reading applications, we already have that built-in institutional knowledge about high schools from around the world.
And in the applications themselves, in the recommendation letters that your teachers and your counselors end up sending along, we get to know about your high schools that way too. They're not just a list of adjectives that are shared with us about kind of who you are within the school community, but there are some some specific details about the classes that you've been in. The teacher might say something along the lines of, she was one of only 8 students to qualify for AP Calculus this year. So we get to know you within the context of your high school that way. And his B plus grade average in physics was quite an accomplishment. Only one student in the class earned an A minus. So your teachers will certainly shout you out as far as who you are within a specific class and kind of how you stack up against students within your high school as well. And oftentimes counselors will take some time for a paragraph or two to talk about the high school as a whole, to give us a little bit of that background knowledge of what they think that we should know year in and year out. And this is an example here of a teacher evaluation that's filled out on the Common App, the Common application, just to give us a sense of, within the structure of the class, who you were and the qualities that you brought forth. So in addition to the travel that we do, these recommendation letters allow us to really get us a better sense of who you are within the context of your high school.
That's a good point, Tom, because as I think students think we just look at a transcript in a vacuum, but so often we have documentation and context provided from the teachers or from the counselors. So even if it's a school we haven't visited, we get so much context from the rest of the file.
It's true. And this next one is definitely another big way that we get to learn about high schools on a year-to-year basis. Drew, I'll let you take this one if you're all set.
Sure. The school profile is a document that not a lot of students have seen, but it's really the most important document in the application for us, because it's sent to us by your school's guidance office. And it's not interesting to you, but it's incredibly interesting to us because it provides all of the information that we need to understand the academic work that you've been doing. Most schools update this every year or every other year, and it's going to provide information upon the courses available. You can see on this one, it provides information about what advanced placement courses are offering, also what unique courses are offered. You can see down there at the bottom information about the GPA, information about grading. And this is, it's sometimes I think it's the decoder ring. I don't know if that's a dated reference, but it helps us interpret what the courses mean, what the grades mean. And while I said it might be uninteresting to you, it's incredibly interesting to us and an important, vital document. And for the most part, an admissions office would never read an application without this, because it is this document that unlocks the key to understand the work that you've done in the classroom. And I don't know, it's not my favorite part of a file, but it's certainly the most important part of the file as we read and understand a student's application.
And it's one of the first documents that we read as well. It pops up right away before we even look at your transcript. This information is provided as readers. And as you can see with the green highlights, when we're going through a student's application, we're able to kind of put things in boldface type or really focus on things that we think are important, so that other counselors are able to take notice of these things, and that we're making sure that the admission committee as a whole is able to see these things as well. Drew, do you have specific things that you look for when you're opening up a student's application and you go to the school profile? What catches your attention first usually?
Yeah, I mean, one things I want to see is what's the course levels available at that high school. Do they offer honors? Do they offer AP? Do they offer advanced? Do they offer accelerated? Do they offer IB? Do they offer none of those? And that's really, I think, to me, that helps frame how I'm going to look and evaluate the student's transcript. This is another example of a second page. Usually high school profiles can be 2, 3, 4 pages, sometimes even more than that. But you can see on this one, there's information about the school closing in the spring 2020 during the pandemic. And almost every high school profile now has information about the pandemic and how that's affected learning, how that's affected course registration, how that's affected grading. And that's really important for us. You also see here a grade distribution chart so that we can see the array of GPAs available at the high school. Now, not every high school profile has a grade distribution chart like this, but when it's provided to us, it does give us information into where GPAs span across that high school. Sometimes profiles give us a sense of the community, and sometimes the community service requirements, sometimes standardized testing profile. It's rich with information that helps us to really sort of understand the context in which you've been learning. We can't understand a transcript without this. And like I said, it's really helpful when we visited a high school, but it is with the school profile like this, it is absolutely not necessary for us to visit a high school to understand the context in which you've been studying and which you've been performing for 4 years.
And I would say, whatever is going on in the world, especially recently, the pandemic has changed things at schools. So this is something that we expect to see, just how grading changed and how the school was affected by the pandemic. And I also notice, changes to educational philosophy here, and sometimes schools will decide that they want to go away from AP or IB courses. So it allows us to know what to look for and how things might change from our historical data to how things are going now, adding different elements to their curriculum, social justice requirements, foreign language requirements, things of this nature. So this is a living document that gets updated and changed on a year-to-year basis, but really does have that wealth of information for admission counselors. And to supplement that, there's also a school report here as well, which usually is even more up to date in some ways than school profiles, and contains some other very important and relevant information just about how your senior year is going, and kind of an updated look at your school. So Drew, I didn't know if you had some things in mind with the school report.
Yeah, I mean, this is really just a complement to the school profile, and it sort of condenses the information into a standardized form. This usually accompanies the transcript as well. And it gives us information like who's your guidance counselor, what's their email address, what's their telephone number and extension. So if we do have questions, you see information there about the makeup of the community, and this is a standardized form. And so our eyes are a little bit more familiar about where to go for information on here, right? Like I said before, whether there's service requirements, the daily schedule, is your high school on a block schedule? Or is a modified block schedule? All these things really help us understand the context and be able to tell the difference between each individual high school. And I know that's something that high school students worry a lot about when they apply to college. But with all of these tools at our hand, we get the information that we want to know. Also, a part of this, it will tell us what your GPA is and what the GPA scale is, and what the high GPA at your high school is, and what kind of curriculum you're on, whether it's an IB curriculum. And it just really helps give us the information that we need when trying to place you in the context of your own high school.
Thanks so much, Drew. And we're just going to be going over a couple of housekeeping items, and do just want to say, hope you had fun with the first poll, which had some thoughtful and silly questions about your high school mascot. We are also going to be launching another poll momentarily, just to kind of ask you what you think is most important as counselors are trying to differentiate one high school from another. So before we jump into the Q&A portion, I know we've had some good questions coming in throughout our presentation, and maybe there's some more still yet to be submitted. Just wanted to let you know, once again, this is episode 3 of 5 of our webinar series, how to make your application stand out. And every Sunday night for the next 2 Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. Next Sunday, we're just going to be talking about demonstrated interest, the engagement that you can put forth with colleges, why it matters and what it can do for you. And then episode 5, I will be jumping in and joining in for again. My colleague Lynn and I are going to be doing a live application review, and the commentary is going to be coming from us. So kind of to give you that inside peek at what does it look like to read an application? What is it that we look for? What are the opinions of 2 counselors on a specific file? So I think we can open it up to Q&A, and Drew, we can kind of attack the questions together, if that's all right with you. And it looks like, based on the poll that we just took, students felt like all of the above were important. There was definitely a recognition of courses offered, GPA scale and weight, COVID changes, but we agree, these are all of the things that we're going to be looking for on school profiles. So there are maybe some that stand out from the rest, but they're all relevant um, to what your high school is all about and how you fit into that picture.
Tom, when you're reading applications every year, do you remember things from the prior year about schools and about courses offered or levels of courses or things like that?
Yeah, I think my brain is always turning when I'm opening up a new application. I'm trying to think, did we have students who applied here from this school last year? Have I visited this school before? What are my associations and connotations with this school? And um, I think your mind might go to Mascots, Drew. I know you're a big fan of Mascots, but I feel like that's a connector for you sometimes.
I don't know if we heard your answer. Could your high school mascot win in a race against a raccoon?
My high school mascot was a cadet, which Seder, I feel like they have a lot of heavy equipment on that might drag them down. So I picture the rat. And the other question is, how fast is a raccoon? I'm not exactly sure, but
Let me ask the better question, Tom. Could you win in a race with a raccoon?
yes, yes. Drew, could you?
Particularly if the raccoon is chasing me. I feel pretty good about my chances.
Yeah, I think back on the beginning of the movie Elf to visualize this scene, trying to make it to New York City and gets attacked by that rabid raccoon.
I'll also say it's not something I say out loud a lot, but a lot of times when I'm on campus and um, I meet students, and I always, one of my first questions is, where do you go to high school? And they usually tell me. In my brain, I'm already saying to myself, okay, that school has an unweighted GPA. That school lists their courses as advanced, not honors, and that school offers 12 plus APs. And I can't say that I remember that for every high school from students that I meet, but so often that information sticks with us every year. And I don't say this out loud. It would seem a little weird if I started rattling off data about an individual high school's curriculum, but that information is so important to us when we're reading the application. And we read applications multiple times and we talk about them in committee, that information does start to stick in your brain, so that you get a sense of I mentioned we have the history in the application in the admissions office, and some of that's in the computer system, but a lot of it's in our head as well. Any questions that look good to be answered, Tom, from the Q&A?
Definitely, yeah. And I'll just say we are kind of encyclopedias of that random knowledge that's taking up a lot of our brain space. So hopefully it comes in handy one day, but definitely comes in handy when we're reading applications. So one student just asked, in terms of courses offered, how is something like dual credit compared to AP classes? And I think that can be expanded out to the highest level that's offered at a specific high school. So, for us, it is context. It's like it totally depends on what it is that's offered at that high school. Like there are plenty of occasions where there are no AP options and dual credit is all that's offered. And I think one thing that sometimes might get lost in translation with the college application process is that you really can speak to us directly to give us that important context, whether it's within the confines of an admission interview or kind of writing in an email or your additional information. So you can let us know your rationale for taking specific classes, and oftentimes that illuminates your decision and allows us to think, okay, there was some serious thought behind why college biology was taken rather than the EP biology offered at high school. Drew, any thoughts with that?
I was just going to say this, again, we say this a lot in our office, but this just should impress upon you the importance of an interview as a part of the admission process. At Holy Cross, it's strongly recommended. And oftentimes we will talk in the interview about the classes you're taking. And students often in an interview will say, like, yeah, I chose the dual enrollment for this class. I choose the advanced level for this class. And again, in the interview, we gain context, not just about what's been available to your high school, but also about the choices that you've made from year to year. And those might have changed from the pandemics. I know at some high schools, some courses haven't been available that traditionally have been. I also want to say too that AP courses gets a lot of mention, but there are some schools that just don't offer AP courses. Some schools don't offer honors courses, and we never punish a student for the lack of courses available to them at their high school.
Yeah, and that was a question that came in from a counselor as well. Just students coming from rural high schools without a lot of AP or dual enrollment courses. And there should not be concern that they won't be looked upon as favorably, because what's offered is offered, and it's really about what students make of the opportunities that are made available to them. So taking on the rigor that you have available to you and doing as best as you can in those classes. And then there are so many other aspects to a student's candidacy outside of their transcript. This is a whole nother webinar topic, but all the different ways that they engage with us and things that they're involved in, and yeah, just the way that they present themselves to an institution is certainly much beyond just rigor and grades, although it's certainly a criteria that we look at. And there was just a question that came through about a significant drop off during a student's junior year during the pandemic. Certainly there's that extra question in the common application, but will an application even be looked at if it doesn't hit a certain mark? Yeah, we absolutely take a look at each and every application that the school receives, regardless of what the transcript says or what the GPA is. And you should, if this is your situation and you felt like freshman and sophomore year were chugging along and the virtual learning or life in general just brought your grades down, there's definitely going to be a lot of people who are in this same boat. And I think it's our job as counselors to be able to handle these situations delicately, and to know, you were clearly doing well, and then there were these external factors, and they could be a variety of different things. But Drew, how would you go about answering that question?
Yeah, and I think that's important context that we'll gain from the guidance counselor recommendation as well. I mean, that's the guidance counselor recommendation helps explain your experience over the course of your 4 years. Course selection, dips in grade, raises in grades, commitments both in and outside of the classroom. I know I said the school profile was the most important document to us, but in some ways the guidance counselor recommendation is neck and neck with the school profile, because it will explain, your counselor will take the time to explain what your life has been like over the 4 years. And so that maybe that should impress upon you the importance of spending time with your counselor, getting to know your counselor, and giving them the information that they can add to the recommendation so that we can understand your application the best. And again, I'll put another plug in for interviews, because that's certainly a topic that may come up in the interview. I ask about it all the time, about what's school been like for you for the last year and a half, because I know everybody's got a different answer, and it really helps us place your application in context.
And another question just came through about, should students shy away from explaining COVID-19 changes in their lives when writing their Common App essays? And essays were actually the topic of webinar number 1, which is archived on our website already. So go back and watch that one. But I will also say, we definitely do recommend that students take advantage, if need be, of the COVID-19 prompt that is in the Common Application to be able to share that information. And they're welcome to share any information about the pandemic in their essay, but I think it's because there is that space that's provided elsewhere, allowing you to tell a different story in your Common App essay is probably what we would recommend. And there was a question from a counselor just about, does the admission team know a high school's philosophy regarding enrolling in AP classes, like limits on how many AP classes a student can enroll in? And that is definitely listed on the school profile, on the school report. And high schools do let us know, that they don't let their students get carried away and take 6 APs in a year, that they do limit juniors to 2 APs and seniors to 3 APs. So that's definitely something that we're looking for and that we're aware of, that there are, sometimes these hard caps at schools so that students can't overload their plate. And a student who attends a small private school, which uses narrative evaluation for grades, some selected grades for classes, but this might be the first time that we're seeing a student apply from this specific high school. So Drew, how do you go about, like, when it comes to a grading scale that maybe isn't quite as common, how do you go about handling that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing to understand is that every school is on a different GPA scale, just about every school in the country. And, one thing is that we will do what we need to do to fairly evaluate that student. And so it's going to be from reading the recommendations and reading those grades, whatever the grading scale might be. And if need be, we'll follow up and call the school, call the counselor. And remember also, we're weighing your writing sample in the essay. We're gathering information, hopefully, in your interview. And through that process, generally speaking, we usually have enough information to fairly evaluate the student. And if we don't, we reach out. We'll call the school. We'll reach out to the student. And sometimes when something looks strange or we're having difficulty, that's when we use our collective wisdom as a committee. We look back in our database to see if that will help provide more information. And if not, we just ask the question. That's why that school report form has your counselor's email and direct line, so that we can feel confident about the decision we're making, whether there's enough information for us in the file. There almost always is. And if there isn't, then we'll certainly follow up and ask those questions. Sometimes for me, I see that as great professional development, Tom, when I can say, I don't know anything about the school. I looked on the website, I read the file, I still have some questions, and that gives me a great opportunity to reach out to the counselor and find out what I need to know. And that'll really help me with that student, but also in the future as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think about a couple of years ago, us sitting as our admission committee, the 13 of us kind of reviewing applications together. And there was a school that I read this application from, and I struggled to kind of parse out how to evaluate the transcript and the grades and the school profile. So it went before our admission committee, and my colleagues kind of gave me some direction, and they said, read it again and reach out to the high school and make sure you're on the right track. So those are the kinds of things that happen within our office. And I agree, definitely good professional development for me to get that question answered, so that this year when that school came back up again, I could feel pretty confident looking at the student's transcript and could still rely on the knowledge of the counselor who I had already touched base with. Question just about kind of grade trends, freshman year grades and upward trajectory. Junior year and the beginning of senior year, those are the grades that are closest. It's who you are today and likely who you are going to be as a student on a college campus. So we definitely do see a fair amount of students who had kind of that rocky start to high school and have improved since then. So there's, often those trends. It's not to say that ninth year grades are not important. They certainly are looked at. And it's also not to say that, to the question earlier, junior year, if you hit a bump in the road, life gets in the way. It's not always just uphill and, a totally linear journey. So we really, I think the word that comes up a lot in application review is context. We really do try to get an understanding of your situation and what you were going through. So doing something like an interview really allows us to talk that out and not try to guess necessarily at what you're going through or how you've developed and grown. Question here just about 2-year IB courses. So will not have completed them on my transcript until the end of my senior year. How are these evaluated differently compared to AP classes that can be completed in a year with AP credit? Yeah, interesting question. It's not as though, Drew, I'll have you weigh in, I guess, and then I'll follow up my thoughts. My thoughts are still percolating.
Yeah, I think the one piece that high school students don't completely understand, nor should they, it's not their job, is to understand that for us, this is our full-time job. It's our full-time job, and our job seems to rise with importance during application season, like once the students click submit in December and January, and when we're reviewing in January and February. But the reality is this is a 12-month job, and the most important thing we can do is to understand context and evaluate students fairly. And you're never punished for the courses that you might be enrolled in, whether it gives us more information or less information, or your high school's choice of courses. So with the IB curriculum, it's certainly something we look at. We don't punish a student for going to school that has one or that doesn't have an IB curriculum either. And we always want as much of information as possible, but we always feel comfortable doing our job with whatever information we have in front of us, as long as we feel like that information is going to allow us to evaluate the student fairly. remember, it's not just about the transcript. It's about the interview. It's about the essay. It's about any other exposure that we get to information about you, from recommendations as well. And it's I think students focus on their GPA and occasionally their test scores, but for us, it's a little bit of scientific work, but it's also a little bit of an artistic work as we try to pull together all of these pieces to evaluate. In some ways, I think about when adults are looking at buying a house, you look at the neighborhood and you look at the layout of the house and you look at how many bedrooms and you're looking at the commute. There's so many different pieces that you put together to come to a fair evaluation. And in some ways, I think evaluating an application is exactly the same.
And there's just a question here about if a student applies who kind of has taken on more rigor in high school with honors and AP, would that be the same as a student with a more consistent GPA? And for us at Holy Cross, we would prefer to see the student who has taken on rigor, honors and AP or whatever that is available at your specific high school, as opposed to a student that hasn't taken on rigor but has maybe earned more quote unquote consistent grades. So we do like to see students that have challenged themselves within the context of their high school, whatever that means for that specific high school. And Drew, I'm glad that our presentation here tonight didn't necessarily go longer than like 10 or 15 minutes because there were so many great questions here. And I think it speaks to the fact that every high school is different. And it is the job of admission counselors through travel, through historical data, through recommendation letters, school profiles, and school reports to really get to intimately know each high school as much as possible and to build that knowledge as time goes by. Any last thoughts before we log off for the night?
I was just going to say, and maybe it's going to sound redundant, is we really want to get to know more about you. So help us get to know more about you. Sign up for interviews if you haven't already. We really want more color and context to your application. And in interviews, I feel like we really get to know you and your school and your environment and what your 4 years in high school has been like. And what particularly the last 18 months has been like for you. So understand that this is the hardest leap sometimes in high school students' mind is to believe that we would know about them and their high school. But it's really the most important piece we do is to get a hold of that context. And it's really one of the more enjoyable parts is learning about all these high schools all around the world and the students who attend those schools.
Well, Drew, it was nice to share some of our Sunday night together, and I hope this was a nice cap off to a good summer weekend for everyone. Hope that we'll see you at future webinars and that you have a great rest of your Sunday night. Thanks so much.